Welcome to Level 2, Unit 8, Teach Beyond the Four Walls of Your Classroom. With technology, it is so increasingly easy to kind of break down the barriers of the four walls of our classroom and connect with other people outside digitally. In this particular activity and unit, we will be learning how you can operate your classroom with Google Meet and YouTube Live. What are the best practices to make your Google Meet successful? How to use Google Maps to take virtual field trips? What the Google Cultural Institute is and how to use it in class? How you can set up a virtual world in Google Earth to enhance instruction? And what Google Lit trips are and how you can use them to inspire your students. A couple products that we're going to take a look at in this particular unit are Google Maps, Google Earth, and Google Meet. The skills that we need to know by the time our unit is concluded: using Google Meet, using YouTube Live, create and edit custom maps, and getting started with Google Earth. The first activity is titled Use Google Meet to Connect to the World. And as we all know, Google Meet is such a powerful tool when we are especially connecting with people who are not right in front of us, as we learned during our COVID-19 shutdown. The big part of this activity is centered around using Google Meet or using YouTube Live to connect with an expert and bring them into your classroom. So there are many different learning needs that can be addressed by utilizing different formats. So the very first thing to determine is how are you going to utilize and bring that, how are you going to utilize technology and bring that expert in? Are you going to use Google Meet or YouTube Live? As we all know, we can just simply go to meet.google.com and create a new Google Meet instantly. Or we can create a calendar event and attach a Google Meet with that. When you want to create a YouTube Live, or if you would like to create a YouTube Live, all you need to do once you are on the YouTube website, if you click the little camera in the upper right hand corner next to your profile picture, the little option that appears, or two options that appear, are upload video and go live. If you click go live, you are able to fill in some other information on when you would like to have this go live. You can schedule it, and then it's going to give you a link that you're able to share out. So you could schedule it for later, grab that link, and then share that out with your expert to join your class. The next part talks about how and when. What do you how are you going to get that person into your classroom? Are they going to call you? You're going to call them? You're going to share the calendar link? You're going to share a YouTube Live event? Whatever it so happens to be, that's what this card is referencing. And as we all know, technology can be a little bit tricky sometimes. So it's always important to test your particular feature that you are going to be using, whether that be Google Meet or YouTube Live. Always make sure you can test that out with maybe somebody down the hall, across the way, or have somebody else join that's not on the same domain, just so you can ensure that that other person will be able to join when it's go time. The location is another thing to consider. How are you going to gather your students around to view said expert in your classroom? You're going to utilize a projector style, or were you going to be utilizing a Google Meet where everybody kind of has them on their own device? Or just how are you going to display once you have an expert join your class? The next tile talks about rehearsal. Always a good idea to have a routine for your students that allows them to kind of practice what's going on, and so they're ready to go once the time comes as well. And of course, as always, review the policy and permissions about guest speakers and media and all of that kind of stuff. If you have a PBIS lesson that's centered around technology, now would be a great time to integrate that into your lesson to ensure that your students are completely capable of performing at a high level once you have an expert joining your class. As you move down the page and further in the activity, you have some questions to answer on how you can get inspired. what will be your goal? What kind of meeting are you going to use? Who is it that you're going to connect with? And what steps are you going to take to ensure a successful meeting? You're able to jot down your answers in that little space there. Moving on down, of course, we have our C examples from other educators. What did they have to say? Section that you're able to take a look at. And once you have done all of that, you are ready for the activity lesson check. Number one, what are a few ways to find someone to connect with your class? Number two, you need to have a Google account set up for YouTube Live to work. Number three, one best practice for hosting a YouTube Live event is. And number four, what makes for a successful Google Meet? Next activity is called Use Maps to create exciting virtual field trips. There's a lot to unpack here, but basically what it's saying is Google Maps is an incredible tool to take your students on any kind of virtual field trips anywhere in the world, even underwater, as it says, using Street View. So Google Maps is great for all ages and can create that allows students to create and share maps that explore a wide variety of landscapes within the world. As you scroll down a little bit, there are 4 tiles on how you can listen, um, how these teachers utilize Google Maps in their classroom and how beneficial it can be for their students. So the big part of this is you can allow your students to take a virtual tour. So these tours can be delivered top down, where the teacher creates a map for all students, or from the bottom up, meaning every student creates a map. So either way, the learning is not limited to where they can physically go, but wherever they can imagine. So in what way do you feel you could use Google Maps or Street View to take your students on a tour of the learning in your classroom? One of my favorites was to always pull up the setting of a story when I taught language arts, just to go to Google Maps, even do a little Street View and show them real life of a place that they may never have the opportunity to visit outside of the classroom walls or outside of the city or even locally. So Google Maps is definitely a powerful tool and can be used almost on the fly or a little bit more in depth. The next section talks about Google Arts and Culture, which is a set of projects aimed to make greatest cultural artifacts in the world accessible to everybody. It's not just a bunch of artifacts, but what's nice about it is they also have a place where you can take engaging virtual field trips to places you could never get to. So if you open up Google Arts and Culture, you will see so many different field trips that you are eligible to take with your students. So some of these, as you are seeing, are art related, but you can even get even further once you start diving in to a little bit more information as you scroll down the page. So most definitely check out Google Arts and Culture, because there is more than likely something for you to utilize when you start um, teaching a lesson in your classroom. A very cool tool is known as My Maps. So with My Maps, users are able to plot points, draw shapes, create layers, measure distance, and collaborate with other map users. Imagine a place where you're able to turn around and do some math concepts, or start pinning locations where you can see trips and that kind of stuff. An example of this has already been created. So as a Northern Iowa alum, I created one that my maps on the University of Northern Iowa, where I set pins on the actual campus of UNI. So what's cool is there are opportunities for you to track points and trips that were made and able to stop by different locations on a map and that kind of thing. Taking a look at the other maps that give you an example of what you can do, if I click on this second untitled map. So being a Chicago Blackhawks fan and hockey fan, you were able to I was able to plot these points. So here I've plotted the United Center in Chicago, the Xcel Energy Center in Minneapolis where the Minnesota Wild play. If I want to, I can determine the distance between these two. I can find some more information out when I click them. I'm able to determine the actual topographical location of these particular places. So just a really, really neat stuff that you're able to do in Google My Maps. This third one that's been created is really kind of a neat one. that allows us to take a look. It's my personal mind map, so it kind of describes my educational journey. So as a student, I went to Buffalo, I went to Walcott, then I went to West. I've taught at Williams and I've taught at Sudlow. I attended college at the University of Northern Iowa. So you're able to see kind of my personal learning journey, and that's something that's kind of neat to show students, that they're able to see on a map where you might have gone to college, or maybe where you used to teach, or where certain stories take place in the distance between two cities that maybe are mentioned in a certain story, or maybe where a certain scientist is from, or a mathematician. And then you can plot those points and determine the distance between those two. All of those cool things you can do once you get into Google My Maps. If you really want to take that a step further, you can find the Google Earth education page. So much of what you see can be adapted to the online version of Maps, but you have some abilities to search for beginning, intermediate, and advanced lessons. Google Earth is kind of a next lesson type thing, so we won't dive too much into that. But if you would like, you can take a look at that Google Earth education page. Once you've been able to play around with My Maps and Google Maps and the arts and culture, you are ready for the lesson check. Number one, Google Maps are only private and cannot be shared with others. Number two, which Google Maps feature allows you to view an area at ground level? Number three, students can build virtual tours using. And number four, My Maps allows students to plot their own points on a Google map. The next activity is titled Create a World to Explore with Students. So as we mentioned in the previous activity, this one's going to talk quite a bit about Google Earth. So what is really neat about this is Google Earth is an application that allows us to see everything kind of in a three-dimensional world. And you can even zoom out further to see how it would look from space, which is just incredible when you're trying to teach a student something that they will never be able to experience, simply because we have the tools available to do it in our classes. So there are several different lesson ideas that you can use with Google Earth. The very first one is Google Lit Trips. So as a language arts teacher, this is kind of a special affinity to me. So if you look in the Google Lit Trips website, you're able to take a search and see what kind of lit trips are available. What it does is it plots out points of a character that a character may take. What's cool about this is we're able to kind of progress day by day, or however it appears in the story. So we are able to see the exact path that that character went. So you can take a look here. You've got a whole bunch of different alphabetical tiles you can take a look at. Long Walk to Water, whatever you would like. Any of these alphabetical ones. So quite a few of them, 85 different lit trips. What happens is, though, any of these you have to request access to. So if you go over here to the Google Lit Trip store, you have to request a lit trip. And then you will be sent an email with a web link that allows you to search that lit trip on Google Earth. So unfortunately, it's not one of those that you can just quickly click on and take your students there. You do have to kind of plan ahead to determine the lit trip. But I can assure you that once you are able to take students on these lit trips with Google Earth, they are an incredible, incredible tool. As you move down a little bit further, you're able to see an example of a lit trip. You see in this one talks about Walk Two Moons and the progression and track that they took here on the screen. So that's a little preview of what you would see using that Google Earth lit trip. Now, when we think about Google Earth and these kinds of tools, we often think about social studies as primarily the main use of this. What's neat, you can teach them about World War I in Google Earth. So it's a cool opportunity for students to take a look at, especially when you have a presentation of this caliber, that you're able to kind of show students in a visual sense just how things in war impacted the layout and the landscape of certain countries. So he's got a website here. This Micah Shippey managed this entire project. He's got a website that you can take a look at, that you're able to see and look at how he utilized this World War I lesson using Google Earth. Moving on down, you take a look at Math on Maps. So um, this is a neat thing too. It talks about media for math, and it has a collection of resources that contextualize math and global architecture that allows students to explore. For example, you can take a look at the geometry of the pyramids if you would like to be a little bit more specific. So as it loads Google Earth, I just, if you saw, clicked on geometry of the pyramids, but we'll go in here to Google Earth and we will see um, what is in store for us with the pyramids in Google Earth. Our mathematics of pyramids Earth option loads. You will see down here we have a table of contents, and when it's clicked, we can see the mathematics of pyramids, the pyramids at Giza, the Temple of the Inscriptions, Chichen Itza, and the Louvre Pyramid. So if I arrow through these, we get to see a little bit more in depth on how this works. There's a little video here on how you can take a look at that. All of these tools that are in Google Earth allow us to do various things with it. So as you see, we continue to move forward with all of these different Google Earth tools, and we're able to see exactly how this all works. As you see here, the Temple of the Inscriptions has been fully loaded, and then we take a look at Chichen Itza, and then it, as you see in motion, it travels, and like we just very quickly fly to this location. You almost get a little rumble in the stomach when it is moving around so quickly. So as you see, I'm able to move this around, and then I have the video over here. I can play it, and then I'm able to take a look at more of the geometry in the pyramids. So the final one is the Louvre Pyramid. So we're going to fly from Chichen Itza all the way to the Louvre Pyramid in Google Earth. So neat opportunity for your students to see a variety of different things and have a little quick flight without the boarding pass and TSA to go through. So that is Media for Math, and that was just a quick example of the geometry of the pyramids. As you move further down the way, it shows how you can use Google Earth as a measuring tool. So if you click that, it basically shows you or gives you an example of how you can utilize Google Earth as a measuring tool. And then you have a little bit more information on the measure tool created by Richard Byrne. And if you are unfamiliar with Richard Byrne, he has this website called Free Tech for Teachers, and it's a great resource. He's right up there, in my opinion, with Alex Keeler, Eric Kurtz, Matt Miller, all of those. I definitely throw him in the same conversation. So if you're ever looking at how to insert technology into the classroom and just want to look at somebody that is credible, take a look at Richard Byrne, most definitely. As you come down here, you're able to do a little storytelling with the Earth project. There's a quick start guide that you're able to take a look at. And once that loads, you can see the guide for creating that project on Google Earth. As you move further down, you can see that video. Take a look at that video. It explains things a lot nicer than I ever could. It gives you some options that you can do to do that. So mapping your places, choosing the icon, adding text, photos, adding another place mark, creating a full screen slide, and then the present button. So a lot of different things you can do. So you've got Google Earth for the web, Google Earth Pro, and then if you need more information, you can take a look at the Help Center. However, Google Earth is not just a social studies option. You can see that it goes across the curriculum, and then it asks you down here, how can you use Google Earth in the subject you teach? Answer or enter your innovative ideas there. And as is customary, you are able to see what other educators said and how they use Google Earth in their classroom. Once you take a look at all of that and have had a chance to play around with Google Earth a little bit more, you are ready for the activity lesson check. Number 1, Google Earth can be used in the classroom. Number 2, Google Earth can link a viewer to additional content by adding hyperlinks to other websites. Number 3, Google Earth allows teachers and students to. And finally, number 4, we got 5 this time. Google Earth is too complex to be used in elementary school classrooms. And now, finally, number 5, Google Earth can only be used in a lesson on geography. Final activity of this unit talks about tackle global issues with Your Plan, Your Planet. And if you are unfamiliar with Your Plan, Your Planet, it's a digital tool basically built to enhance awareness of our environmental impact and demonstrate how just small, simple life changes can make a big impact. So, there are several different options you have when utilizing this tool. There's several different personalized lessons that you can take a look at. So, for example, in the one that talks about energy, there's a lot of discussion on how energy consumption is related to CO2 emissions and climate change and the rising of the sea levels and all of those different things on how we can do our part to protect energy consumption in our planet. The next one talks about water consumption and just how our actions can impact the water consumption that happens and how it's important to conserve water and so we can have all of these natural resources available to us and to pass down to our students and their kids. The next section talks about food and that consumption. There's a neat little lesson titled Farm to Table that allows you to determine and understand how a particular food goes from growing on a farm to the table in front of you. So there's another little cool Voyager story titled I Am Food that's really kind of neat too. And then this is a cool, this time lapse on Google Earth Engine site can demonstrate how whole landscapes um, are modified for agricultural purposes. So if you get an opportunity to check this out, click this because you're able to determine all of these features and in the year it takes place. So if you see, we're zooming in kind of on the Columbia Glacier Retreat. So you can see as it plays through the continuous melting of all of these different glaciers, which then contributes to that rise in the sea level in that part of the world. The next tile talks about stuff, and this one might be the most impactful to our students because it talks about how we can question our behavior when it comes to consuming just all of the stuff. Clothes, electronics, plastic, tools, all of that take a lot of resources to produce, and eventually it's going to fill up the landfill. So that's another neat lesson to talk talk about and share with your students. So there are a couple different sample lessons for a 5th grade, and then there's a 6th to 8th grade lesson. Google Slide, Google Sheet for presenting data analysis is already set up for you. If you would like, you're able to determine how you would like to get started with this Your Plan, Your Planet topics and how you would like to address that with your students. Once all that is completed, you're already ready for the lesson check. So number 1, Your Plan, Your Planet can be used in any classroom. Number 2, Your Plan, Your Planet can be used in classrooms for any grade level. Number 3, Your Plan, Your Planet is a great tool to kickstart discussions on which of the following topics. And number 4, which other tools in combination with Your Plan, Your Planet can you use to personalize your lessons? Once all of those activities have been completed, you are ready for the Unit 8 unit review. 6 questions this time. Number 1, YouTube live events are blank recordings that can be saved to your YouTube channel for later viewing. Number 2, which of the following describe how you could use Street View in a classroom? Number 3, KMZ files are used in which tool? Number 4, which map creation tool provides the flexibility to create, share, and collaborate within Google Drive? Number 5, Google Earth can be used in literary lessons too. And finally, number 6, which of the following are examples of how you could use Google Meet or YouTube Live?